Hi, Happy New Year. I'm Elaine Orr, and I thought I would talk to you a little bit about getting started on that book. Why today? Because lots of people make a New Year's resolution to write a book. Maybe not everybody, but that's okay because we all have different interests. However, it takes a lot to get started, especially after working all day doing something else. So I have a couple of ideas for you. First, you've decided you want to do this, but people around you may not agree that it's a good idea for you to spend an hour every evening behind a closed door writing. So you sort of have to figure out what works for you and the people that you live with. And one of the things you can do is cut some things out of your life that you do on your own. For example, if you regularly play on a sports team, do you need to do that for a while? I mean, softball's great, but it's a lot of time in the summer, so maybe you could use that time for something else. So finding time is your first issue, but you can do it if you decide this is the most important thing you want to do right now. Doesn't mean you ignore your family, but it has to become a priority or it will just be the thing you can slide off your plate when you're busy with life. So try to think of ways to work that commitment into your life. You often hear people say that you learn a language best if you work on it 15 minutes a day. In other words, you're training your mind to think like that in small increments. You're not trying to crunch everything together and then go away from learning that language for 2 weeks. I would say with writing a book or an article that it's more like half an hour to an hour a day. And then if you can get a little more time on the weekends, you've got something you can start to pull together. And then you say to yourself, but what am I pulling together? You may have an idea, I'm sure you do. I know that when I come up with a new idea, it sort of twirls around in my head for a while, and then I jot a few notes, often literally on a napkin, but hopefully not. I do carry a small notebook in my purse. But when you get that idea, that initial thought, just write it down. I guarantee you won't have it in 2 weeks. So you start with an initial thought. In my case, I will often start with the characters and then think about what I want them to be doing. Occasionally I see an incident that makes me think about a story that could include something like that. But for me, it's about the people in the books more than the plots, which may show in my books, but I think when you develop characters, you know well that it's easier to think as they would think as you go through the book. So after you jot those notes, do you do an outline? Some authors would say absolutely, and some authors would say no, I go by the seat of my pants. Those are called pantsers. And either way can work, but I ascribe to something in the middle. At the bottom of what I'm writing, I throw ideas for what might come next. And then I have something somewhere to look at besides the immediate words that I'm writing. And I think that's important because, especially if your life is busy, you're not going to think as logically about that if you don't write it down. And you do need to have some logic to this. If you go willy-nilly into writing, you could get halfway through and think, oh, that doesn't really work. Now, it's okay to see that and make changes. We certainly do. But if you can avoid rewriting a lot, why not? So find some way to make notes on what you want to do as you're doing it. The thing I have found most useful is a tool I call chapter summaries. After I've written 2 or 3 chapters, I start this document that lists, mostly in bullet form, what's gone on in that chapter. It will also say who was introduced. It will also mention if I'm following one line of thinking more in that chapter than another, but it lets me see what I've done and relate it to what I want to come next, quickly relate it. Because if you don't write for a couple of weeks and then you get back to it, you might think, oh, gee, I need to rewrite. I need to read what I wrote. And that may or may not be helpful, but it takes a lot of time. So if you can avoid having to go over things before the end of your first draft, you'll get more writing done. So these chapter summaries become kind of a working document for me. I even share it with my critique group as I go, because they're getting the book in pieces. And if it's not your book, you're not going to keep in your head what the goal is for a particular character or plot line. So they say it's very useful for them to have that. I save those chapter summaries. Some of them I have notes scrawled all over, because if I'm on the subway or whatever I'm doing, that will fit in my purse and I can pull it out and look at it and do some thinking. But the single most important thing is not to quit. There will be times when you can't devote much time to writing. Somebody gets sick, suddenly you have a huge project at work and you need to turn your mind off in the evening so that you can regroup for the next day. That's great. But if you have thought through what you're writing and you have those chapter summaries, you can get back into it easily, more easily. Nothing about writing is easy. So those are my thoughts on New Year's Day. Mostly, it's just important to do it. You can't publish anything until you put your tailbone in a chair and keep writing. So Happy New Year 2021. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to my webpage, www.elaineorr.com. Thanks for watching.